February was the month of love, but did I love these books? Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Bree and this is 4 Paws in a Book. Today we are going to be talking about the 15 books that I read in the month of February, and I definitely had a very wide range of enjoyment, as we will. I had some 5-star reads. I had a 2-star read. It's fine. I'm going to be doing things a little bit differently this month with my wrap up. I'm going to be talking about these in chronological order, specifically grouping together books that I read for vlogs. So that way, when I talk about a book, if you want to hear my live in-depth thoughts, you can check out the vlog where I read it. I read a lot of my books for content. There are a few on here that I didn't vlog, but for the most part, I've liked to vlog. I like to talk about my thoughts as I'm reading them. However, I know there are some of you that don't really watch vlogs and really just want a condensed version of a wrap-up, and so that is what this is going to be. I will give you my thoughts on all of the books. It just might be a little bit quicker if it is a book that I have talked about in depth. Now, first up, let's talk about some statistics. I am a stats nerd. If you are not, then you can skip ahead and I'll have timestamps down below where you can get to the books. But for those of you that also like the numbers, let's talk about it. I read 15 books in the month of February, which is pretty good for a 28-day month. That's 6,444 pages, which is actually about 250 more pages than in January with fewer days. I typically read a lot in February, and I think part of it is like seasonal depression and I don't want to do anything else. I just want to read. Also, I had a lot of video content that I wanted to put out, so that's why I imagine on average, if you round it out, it's about 230 pages per day that I read, which is a lot of pages per day if you think about it. That's a lot. You know, obviously there were some days that I read a lot more than that, some days that I read a few. That's how averages work. And then my average page count per book was 429.6, so almost 430 pages. So we had some big books in here. We had some chonkers, and I still read a ton. I had some good books too. My most read genre, of course, was Romantasy. I don't foresee that changing anytime soon, but also because we had Romantasy BookCon, we had Romantasy-a-thon, I did read a ton of Romantasy for this month. So I read 6 Romantasy, 6 romance, so actually I guess they're technically tied, and then I have read 3 thrillers as well. So my genres were definitely not as varied this month, but I think in March they will be. We'll see what happens, but yeah, we had a smaller variation this month. My average star rating was a 3.9, so a little bit lower than we had in February. We dropped down below the 4.0 mark. My lowest rating was a 2.5 star, so I had one of those. I had 3 3-star reads. I had 2 3.5-star reads. I had 4 4-star reads, 2 4.5-star reads, and 3 5-star reads. So again, we did have a great month in terms of reading, in terms of enjoyment. I am really enjoying this like reading based off of vibes and being a little bit less critical about the books that I'm reading. Just reading, like, if I love the book, if I can't stop thinking about the book, I'm gonna give it 5 stars. Looking at the publication breakdown, I read 3 new release books, so 2025 releases. All of those came from the new release romance vlog. I read 5 books that were backlist, which means 2023 or before, and then I read 7 that were 2024 releases. This is something that's probably going to be pretty common in the first half of the year, as I am still trying to work through 2024 releases, and then as we get into the later half of the year, we'll see more current year releases. I read 5 books via audio alone. I read 1 book physically, just with my eyeballs alone, and then 9 books with a mixture. So I read it on ebook or Kindle, or physically even, and then also the audiobook. I am definitely someone who has really leaned into the idea of reading the same book in multiple formats. Either I'm immersion reading it, so I'm reading it and listening at the same time, but more often than not, I'm actually listening to it while I'm going and doing things. But then instead of like picking up another book when I sit down to read, I just find it on Kindle Unlimited or I read it physically. So that's what you're probably going to see a lot of when you see a mixture. That means that I'm just kind of like doing the same book in multiple formats as I'm reading it. 14 of the books that I read were targeted at an adult audience, and 1 was targeted at a YA audience. This is again something that is trending for me. I don't read a ton of YA books. Occasionally I have 1 or 2, but for the most part we are just seeing the adult titles. I read 5 standalone books. 1 book that was a companion, so it's basically like a standalone in a series kind of thing, if that makes sense. I started 4 series, I continued 5 series, and I caught up with 4 of those series. All right, those are my stats. Let's talk about the books. The first book that I read for February was a book that I actually wasn't vlogging, and that is The Boyfriend by Frida McFadden. This was my water bowl pick for my patrons. My top 2 tiers get to pick books for me to read, and this was Aoife from Pretty Purple Polka Dots, and we actually ended up buddy reading this book together, which was a lot of fun. It was actually her first Frida McFadden book, I believe, and it was my like 5th or 6th. So this one was not my favorite of the bunch that I have read. I feel like while Frida McFadden is definitely unpredictable, she's getting predictable in her unpredictability. So it's one of those things that you're like, I'm not sure what's going to happen, but something is, and so you are on the edge of your seat for a lot of the time. I don't think that I necessarily saw the plot twist happening, but I was not necessarily surprised by it. So it's definitely a twist that was plausible. It's not one that I was like, oh my gosh, out of left field kind of a thing. I ended up giving this book a 3.5 stars. I had fun with it, but I was really bored for like the first half of the book. It felt really slow, kind of repetitive, and I wasn't a huge fan of the going back and forth between the 2 timelines. Now, I know a lot of thrillers do this. It is a very common trope, and you'll see it again later on in the month, but I just think that one was done better. When we went to our flashback timeline, I was bored. I was taken out of the story. I didn't necessarily care about that, and so the author didn't give me a reason to care about these stories or to care about this timeline. And so because of that, I was really invested in the present day timeline, but then the other one, I was just like, can we get back to the other thing? That's, you know, more fun. So I think if you have not read a lot of Frida, this one will be fun and entertaining, but for me personally, I felt like the book was rushed. I think that she's been putting out too many books too quickly, and this one kind of felt that. It definitely was hurting because of that. But it was 3.5 stars. It was a fun, silly, goofy time, but not my favorite of hers for sure. The first vlog of the month, I did a Should I Stamp It episode where I decided I was going to take my special editions and see if I should stamp them or not. I have a book embosser and I have decision paralysis, so this was kind of helping me do that. I'll have that vlog linked up above for you to check out, but I read 3 books for that and it wasn't as much of a win as I was hoping it would be. So the first one that I read was Heavenly Bodies by Amani Haru. I ended up giving this one a 3.5 stars. I did not stamp it, but I'm keeping it. This is an absolutely gorgeous edition. It's fairy loot. It's from their Romantasy subscription box, and this is a book that like I was really confused for the entire time, and I felt very lost, very detached from the story. I feel like the author was kind of keeping us at arm's length for a lot of it, and I honestly don't remember a lot of this story. Now, like I said, I've read a lot of Romantasy this month, and so this one was just like very mid to me. However, the end of it really solidified this book and was like, okay, I am going to continue this series. The smut at the beginning felt a little bit distant, again a little bit clinical, but that last scene, oh my gosh, I was listening to it while I was at work and it was phenomenal. Phenomenal. This is a celestial romantasy. Our main characters have these powers that are from the stars. So our one character is ruled from the stars, and then she's taken to the land of the light. And so there is this like enemies to lovers, rivals to lovers type of thing. The banter was interesting. I liked it enough, but it's not something that I was like kicking my heels over or anything like that. It was fine, but like, yeah, that ending, I was like, okay, I am going to continue the series for sure. Then I decided to completely switch gears and read another thriller, and I read The Perfect Marriage by Geneva Rose. This one was such a good time. This one I think like really gives you those Frida McFadden vibes, so if you like one, you'll probably like the other. This is one of her older books, but she does have a sequel to this coming out. I'm really curious to see how she is going to like do the sequel, because I feel like we ended pretty like solidly. I don't know what's going on, but this was very twisty. It had a really interesting twist that I did not see coming, but definitely was intrigued by. This also has multiple POVs, and so you are learning little bits and pieces about the event, the thing that happened, but it's like you know more than any of the characters do, and so I think that's a really interesting way of doing things, because like you kind of figure these things out prior to the characters figuring it out. down. I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars, and I had so much fun with it. Is this one like extremely well written? No, it's not like this great piece of literature, but I had such a good time with it. It was extremely bingeable. I read it in one day and I just like could not put it down. And also it's a really cool edition. But I will have you watch the vlog, and if you have not, to see if I stamped this one or not. And then lastly, I read The Prospects by K.T. Hoffman for this one. I don't own this one anymore, so it's pretty obvious that I did not stamp it. But I ended up giving this one 3 stars. This is very much a baseball book that has a romance in it. It's a contemporary romance about our first trans professional baseball player. He is with this big group of other queer baseball players that are either coaches or on the team or something like that. So he definitely has a really good support system, and the found family aspect of this is fantastic. What this is not is a romance. If you don't like baseball, this is not going to be a book for you. If you don't understand baseball or don't watch a lot of baseball, this isn't going to be a book for you, because we go through like almost every single game of the season, and like that's exhausting when you're just watching baseball. Imagine also having to read the book. It's a lot. There ended up being a lot of redundancy. There was a lot of repetition as we went through the season, as we went through like a lot of the games. And one of the other things that I'm not sure if I like liked it or didn't like it, I don't know how I feel about this yet. This is a very like low stakes book, right? So we have this trans player, and it's very low stakes for that being such a monumental aspect of sports. There's I think that in this alternate universe he was the first trans player, and that could have led to a lot of social commentary, a lot of discussion. We could have seen like media interviews and things like that. We didn't get a lot of that. It was very personal. It was very much like just our character and his little bubble, and I imagine that that was kind of a choice, right? I kind of think that the author was doing that on purpose, because this book really solidified queer joy. It really wanted to highlight that, and not necessarily the troubles and the tribulations and the trials that a trans player would be going through, as far as like the media and you know, hecklers and things like that. That like is probably reality in sports, which is sucks, right? But it is in today's climate. That's how it is. So on the one hand, it is happy and light and fluffy, but on the other hand, it's kind of out of reality. And so it just kind of depends on what you want out of the book. If you want something that is truly accurate in contemporary sports, this isn't going to work for you. But if you are wanting something that is queer joy, this is going to work, provided that you like baseball, because there's a lot of baseball. I ended up giving this book 3 stars. It was definitely not a book for me, but I can definitely see that there's an audience for this. I know that there will be people that will be falling head over heels for this book. All right, next I read a couple of books that I did not vlog. The first one being Storm of Secrets and Sorrow by Melissa K. Rorick. I originally was planning on reading this one for Romanticathon, and then it came up as a buddy read in Cassidy's Discord, and so we just started reading it ahead of time. And this book definitely took me longer to read, mostly because I was like reading it along with books that I was vlogging. And I do think that this one struggled a little bit. I only gave this one 4 stars. And like, you're like, you only gave it 4 stars? No, like, I still loved it. I still like this book, and we definitely see more of the world. We see more of the like expanded politics and things like that, and so I really liked that. But for me, this book was just like missing the banter that we had in the first one. There was just a lot of like miscommunication, which is never my favorite thing in a romance, and there was a lot of like just like exterior things that were happening, and so we weren't focusing on our romance in this. This does kind of expand the romance a little bit. It becomes a little poly, a little white shoes. Like, I'm trying not to spoil things at all, and I'm going to be talking about the third book in this as well a little bit later on. There's definitely like consequences that happen in the first book that are carried over into this book and like throughout the series, and Melissa was really great about stringing this plot line throughout the entire series, and like hopefully towards the end, you know, we'll get some sort of resolution.
I swear it's our first nice weather, and everybody's out on their motorcycles today. Why? I just want to film this stuff.
I gave this book 4 stars. I very much enjoyed it. I still wanted to continue the series. This was missing a little bit of the character moments that I absolutely loved in book 1. Then I read Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. This was one that was on my Kerplunk TBR that I was like trying to read books from my own TBR. What a concept. I didn't do a great job in February, but I did read this one. I gave it 3 stars. I was really hoping to like this one, because I know that a lot of people do love this one as one of her original STEMinist novels, But like, this book is the definition of a book that exists, and I read it. I couldn't tell you anything about it. I cannot tell you like the plot details. I cannot tell you like the nothing. I can tell you nothing, and I can like, honestly, even when I was reading it, I was like, this is boring. I honestly, I was just bored. The book didn't do anything offensive. The book didn't do anything that like I hated or anything like that. But it was just so mediocre. Let's just say her writing has improved, and like, you know, maybe we're 1 for 3 now in those original 3 feminist novels. I mean, it's better than The Love Hypothesis, but like, there was no character depth. There was no like individuality to our characters, and like the things that happened to them, the conflict that happened it felt so fabricated. It felt like the author had to have a third act conflict, so we had to have this happen, and it didn't actually like develop our characters at all. They were very two-dimensional from the beginning to the end, and yeah, it was a miss for me, unfortunately. I swear Allie Hazelwood is all over the map for me. I've read some books that I've loved, and I've read some books that I just have not. And yeah, this one is solidly in the I don't even remember a single thing that happened. But that makes a great segue, because this is how I know that it was so mediocre and it's not just like Allie's writing. The next book that I picked up was for my romance new release vlog, and so I picked up Deep End by Allie Hazelwood. So this is her newest release. This is her 2025 release. This is the Schrodinger's cat of romance. Because half of the people that are talking about this book said it's not kinky enough, not spicy enough, and the other half are like, oh my god, it's 50 Shades of Grey. It's too kinky. You know, props to Allie for being able to write a book that is both too spicy and not spicy enough. Props to her. I don't know how she does it. Also, I want to know, if you are reading, like if you see this cover, okay, you see that. You see the letter that Allie writes about this is a really spicy book, okay? This book, the original title was literally Wet. Okay, how do you go into this book not knowing that it's spicy, that it's kinky, that it's a little bit above what she normally writes? I do personally think that Not in Love is actually spicier than this one, but in a different way. This one's spicy for sure. It's exploring kink. I gave this book 5 stars. I loved this book. I really liked the therapy aspect to it. I know that there is some criticism to that, and I totally understand it, but personally I really resonated with it as a former athlete. Former as in like high school is a long time ago. There's a lot of mental like energy that gets expended when you are an athlete trying to literally like just like throw your body into the air and hope that you don't die. So our main character is a professional platform diver, or she's in college. They're trying to be professional, and she has what is essentially the twisties. She hurt herself last year in a diving accident, and since then has not been able to do that one dive. So she goes to jump into the air and her body does something different, which is terrifying, right? Your brain and your body are not acting in sync. That's terrifying. And then we have our professional swimmer, who is the captain of the swim team at the school, and they end up in a mutually satisfying fling. Okay, they find out that they both like kink, that they both like things a little bit more aggressive than the normal vanilla sex. And their previous partners did not like that. And so they end up kind of just getting together just for sex purposes, but obviously like that is going to lead to real feelings, obviously. And I think what a lot of people were expecting when they said, oh, this is a kink book, is that we were going to get Red Room 50 Shades type thing. I think it's very meta when they're like, they talk about 50 Shades in this book, and they kind of like, oh, that's very 50 Shades of you, like kind of thing. And it's just kind of funny, right? It's a joke, and I didn't mind it at all, but I do know that some people did mind it. But like, here's the thing, it was not Red Room. It was not something that is like absolutely over the top ridiculous. It was 2 college kids exploring what they wanted in a sexual partner and a sexual relationship. And obviously when you are 19, 20 years old, you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what's going on. You're just exploring and having fun. And I think that this demonstrated that really, really well. So 5 stars. I talked about it a lot in that blog though, so check that out. Also in that blog, I read First Time Caller by B.K. Borison. This is their new romance release, and this is a Sleepless in Seattle retelling, but like obviously modernized. Our female main character has a preteen daughter who calls into this late night dating show radio like podcast thing, asking for dating advice for her mom. And it all kind of spirals from there. That segment ends up going viral, and she ends up coming on to the show as this, like, they kind of do this bachelor thing where people call into the show and then she decides if she wants to go on a date with them. It's a whole thing. But then obviously, like, she's gonna fall for the radio show host. It's kind of cute. It's really, really adorable. It's very fluffy, and if you're wanting something just to like have a good time with, not to like have to think a ton, this is like just a fun, fluffy rom-com. So I gave this one 4 stars. I really, really enjoyed it, and this is one that I will definitely continue reading from this author. I do want to go back to the Love Light Farms series. I only read the first one in that, and then also there is a sequel that will be coming out with this that I think there were 2 supporting characters at the end that kind of hinted at like, oh, this is going to be their story in the next one, and I kind of love that for them. So I'm excited to see what happens to this series, to see what happens to these characters. But yeah, it was just a fun, sweet, light-hearted time. And then the last book that I read for that vlog was Whirlwind by Kayla Gross. This is a Twisters inspired romance. And you know what? I kept ending my vlogs the first half of the month on like the lowest rated book in the vlog, which kind of sucked. I gave this one 3 stars, and I love Kayla's writing. I love her books. I had one on my favorite books of the year last year, and so this one was a really big disappointment for me. The book was fine. Like, there's nothing that it did that was like necessarily egregious or anything like that, but like it just didn't give me the same energy, the same feels that I'd had from the other 2 books and from other books from Kayla that I've read. This is an age gap romance with a storm chaser professor. Like, he's a meteorology professor and his student, and they go on this trip, this like storm chasing trip, and then they end up, you know, doing it a lot. It's a very, very smutty book. It's a spicy good time. Honestly though, I didn't love the smut in this. Some of the scenes were okay, but there was one where she was like, I don't know, Kayla is a plus size author, so she writes a lot of plus size main characters, and this one, like, it just didn't celebrate that the same way that her other books have. I think there was one time where she was like, her stomach was flat but not too flat, or like, I don't know, it was really weird. It was round but not too round. That's what it was. I can't remember. Anyways, I talked about it in my vlog. The audiobook is really good. It's a duet narration, and it also has a lot of like sound effects in the back, so if that's something that you like you can actually hear the lightning and stuff when they're talking about the storms. So that was a really interesting added benefit to it. Normally I don't love graphic audios, but this one I think it was like minimal enough that even reading it at a faster speed, I still had a good time with that, and still enjoyed the experience of listening to it. But yeah, it was a disappointment for sure. And I think like part of the reason might have been because I had just read 2 romances that were really, really good. So this one just kind of fell short for me, unfortunately. But I'll still read more from Kayla. I have her cowboy romances that I want to try, but I really enjoyed a few of her other books. So we'll see. Then we moved on to Romantasy-a-thon, and I was reading these books leading up to going to LA and being a part of Romantasy Book Con, so it was a really exciting experience. I only ended up reading 3 books for this vlog, for this readathon, which is less than I would have liked, but obviously since I was in LA for a few days, I wasn't reading a ton. So the first one I read was Heartless Hunter by Kristen Cicerelli. Everyone was talking about Rebel Witch because it came out as we were doing Romantasy-a-thon, and so I was like, well, I need to read the first one. And also I met Kristen when I was down in LA, so that was really exciting. I also got to hear her speak on one of the panels about world building, and this one, the world building in this is phenomenal, and so I was really excited to hear her thoughts about how she created this world. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. This is a YA book, but it's definitely upper YA. So if you're hesitant to pick this one up because you don't read a lot of YA or you don't typically enjoy YA, I do think that you should still try this out. So there's not any like on-page sex, but they do talk about it a little bit, and our characters are very influential, very important figures in the world, and so they are still like talking about political marriages and things like that. And our main character is she's cunning, she's a little stabby, not like stabby, but like she's very much out for her own gain, and she is using people at whim. Like she doesn't really care. And I kind of love that about her. So the banter is phenomenal in this. It's a very much a hate to love, a rivals to lovers. We have a witch and a witch hunter, and they are destined to be at odds, to be like each other's enemy. And then, you know, obviously they have feelings, and then there's these external feelings as well, as far as this like familial ties and things like that. And this was just so well done, especially for a first in a series. It's a duology, so I do think that Rebel Witch is going to be concluding the story, which, listen, we all know I love a duology. I've said this multiple times. So I am very excited to pick up Rebel Witch, and hopefully sometime in March we'll see. Then I read Queen of the Blood Throne by Rhiannon Hardin. This is the second book following the Queens of Moirai that I read in December, and I gave this one 5 stars as well. I was actually a little bit hesitant about this one. I went into this not really reading the synopsis, so like this is on me, okay? But this book is a prequel. This book follows the generation before our main characters in Queens of Moirai. And at first I was like, this is weird. We should have had this book first. Maybe this is a whole nother series. I don't know. This is a weird choice. However, when we finished this book, it all made sense. It made so much sense why she put this in the middle. It kind of felt like a flashback episode, like if you're watching this, a series and then you have this origin story episode or something like that. It kind of felt like that, but we make a lot of assumptions about some of the characters that are in the first book. We make a lot of judgments about them, and this one just really like shreds those, okay? And I really want to go back and read the first book with the lens of this, and I talked about this in my vlog, but I was like, well, would it have been more interesting to have this book first and then that one? And I don't think so, because I think having to undo those thoughts and ideas that you had about certain characters is just so interesting. And so when we go into book 3, I'm gonna be like, what? Like, I don't know how to think. I don't know how to feel about this. But yeah, this was 5 stars, and I think this one might be my best book of the month. However, we did end up having another 5-star read for that, and that was Tempest of Wrath and Vengeance. I can never remember the title of this. I've probably said it wrong 3,000 times. This is the 3rd book in the Legacy series, so I'm caught up with this. There is a 4th book that is coming out this summer, and I need it yesterday. This was amazing. Okay, this has a lot of consequences. This book is the find out portion of the fuck around and find out, because there are so many secrets and so many lies and hidden facts and truths and things like that that our character doesn't know about certain things that are happening. And in this one, she is finding it out. And when she finds it out, she goes a little feral, okay? This book is Feminine Rage. This book is taking back her power. This book is that new Dove Cameron song, the like, if you say I'm too much, find less. That's this. That is Tessa. She is amazing, phenomenal, chef's kiss. And we also are introduced to some other characters in this story, and we're starting to get some other POVs, which I think is really interesting. We are starting to find the protectiveness of some of our main characters, specifically the men in it, as they, some things are happening. I cannot talk about like specifics in this because obviously it will spoil the rest of the series, but just know that Theon and Luca have my entire heart. Axel, my entire heart. Like, this is such a phenomenal series. The mental health representation, the PTSD representation that kind of gets strong. Like, it's obviously the strongest in the first book, but it's still like, she's still dealing with the lingering effects of it even into this book, and it affects a lot of the decisions that she makes. So if you want a dark romantasy, like, please pick this book up. Please pick this series up. You will not regret it. Reign of Shadows and Endings is currently like probably my best book of the year. And then after meeting Melissa is like kind of cemented there. She is an absolute sweetheart, and some of the things that like we got to talk about just make so much sense in this. And I definitely want to read Lady of Darkness, which is her other series, now that I have caught up on this one. All right, and then the last week of the month, we had a Scatagorathon. Now that is the readathon that I do with my Patreon every quarter. So we essentially play my old TBR game. I have 6 prompts that kind of match the season, and then we pick 6 letters, and then you roll a dice for your prompt and your letter. It's a whole thing. So if you are interested in my Patreon, no pressure or anything like that, but it is all linked down below. We will be doing it at least 2 more times this year, maybe 3. However, I have a different idea for one of the quarters. It's a new idea that's brewing up here. But anyways, I read 3 books for that one as well. I was still very much on the romantasy high after being at the convention and just being in that world, and I wanted to continue that. So I read The Songbird and the Heart of Stone by Carissa Broadbent. This is it's a 3rd book in the Nyaxia series, but it's actually the like new duology. So this series has a bunch of duologies that are going to be a part of it, and this is the 1st book following the new couple, the new character, and this has necromancy in it. So if you're like you know, if you have a thing for that. I gave this book 4.5 stars. It's not quite a 5-star. I do think that the second book in this series, this duology, has the potential to become a 5-star. I really, really love this. I love the necromancy. I really hope that this will follow the same pattern that Serpent and Ashes did, and that in the second book we will end up getting our male POV. Like, we will get some chapters from our male POV, just because I feel like that will really round out this. We have a lot of Misha's, or Misha, listen, fantasy names, it's a thing. We have a lot of her being in her head, and I think that's why a lot of people didn't like this book, because like she may not resonate with some people, but she, like, I understood her, okay? We get each other. We would be friends, other than the fact that she's, you know, a vampire and I would die in this world. It's fine. But there's a lot of religious deconstruction in this book, and I think that that's something that I always resonate with in fantasy books, because you can have this fictitious religion but really have a lot of true and like real social commentary in this. And so our main character is essentially a missionary for this religion, and she has dedicated her entire life to it. And as we go through this book, we find out that what she has been told, what she's been taught her entire life, is not necessarily the case. And that really wrecks her. And like, that is something that if you did grow up in the church, if you did grow up religious, and you find out as an adult that things are not necessarily like what you were taught, and what you gave your entire childhood to and your, you know, youth and everything, it's hard to do that. And so that's something I really, really resonated with, for sure. And yeah, I'm excited to read the next one. I can't remember the title of it, but it comes out sometime this year. Listen, I'm very bad at dates. It does come out this year though. Then I kind of stepped away from fantasy for the rest of the month. So first up, I read They Never Learn by Lane Fargo. I gave this one 4 stars. Okay, this is feminine rage. This book is feminine rage. This book is about a serial killer who is a professor. Like, yeah, she's a professor. And she is basically just serving justice to those men who got away with things, who didn't, you know, the law did not do what it needed to do, so she did. It's very interesting because getting the POV from the serial killer and getting this idea of like, she's, you know, trying to, like, you know, what happened the entire time. Now this does have a dual timeline. We are seeing these other characters, and you find out about halfway through why these two connect, and I think it was done really well. It was very well done. I was confused for a little bit, but I was like, I know we're gonna figure it out. And it didn't take the entire book, which I think is what happens sometimes, where you are really like, it's drug out too soon. This one, the pacing was fantastic. I do think that the ending of this was a little bit bonkers, a little bit, I mean, I don't want to say unrealistic, because like obviously this is a serial killer, like nothing is like necessarily realistic about this book, but it was just like a little bit bonkers. Like, the characters were doing things that I don't think the characters like were designed or set up to do, but it just needed to further the plot. But this is queer. There is a sapphic relationship in this as our main our main character. It was dark, it was twisted, but it was a good time. If you like the show How to Get Away with Murder, this is going to be for you, because it does have those like same kind of dark academia vibes, because she is a professor at this like elite, like hoity-toity school. Like, that's the best way I can put it. And so there's like How to Get Away with Murder vibe to it, especially like season 1. But it was a good time. I've had this one on my shelf for so long, and I'm really excited to read her new book, The Favorites. That one just came out and everyone's talking about it and about how they're loving it. So now that I have a read from her, I'm excited even more so to go into that one. And then once again, we ended the vlog and we ended the month with like the dud of the month. My worst book of the month, my least favorite one, and it's from an author that I love, so that even hurt more. But One Night with the CEO by Mia Sosa. This is one of her self-published books, and it's about these two people that go to their friend's wedding, and they end up on a one-night stand. They're just like, you know, we're just, you know, gonna get it out, and then we're gonna go back to our lives, and it'll be fine. And, you know, obviously it's not. He falls first, which is kind of cute. Like, he can't stop thinking about her, kind of a thing. There is, like, literally zero communication in this book. He leaves because he had an early flight to get home. And she's like, oh, he left because he didn't have fun last night. And you're like, Miss ma'am, you're exhausting, okay? You're exhausting. I actually can't stop thinking about you. Stop dreaming about you. Stop wanting, you know. But, like, you have it in your head that it's because, like, you guys didn't have fun. But, like, you can tell when you're having fun, right? That's pretty obvious. There's a lot of sex in this book, a lot of spice. It happens very early on. Like, they are talking about it in chapter 1. It throws you right in. I also did not love the representation in this book. There's like very clearly ADHD representation in it, and this is written in 2016, so like it's old. The representation was not there. The conversations were not there. First off, they call it ADD, not ADHD. But she was like, oh, I went to a therapist for ADD diagnosis, and they said I didn't have it. It was just stress, and like if I thought about doing the task, then I didn't want to do the task, and it was like, yeah, because you have ADHD. Like, anyways, so it's one of those ones that, like, I think if this book had been written today, we wouldn't have had that same conversation. We would have probably done the representation a little bit better. There was also some depression and some like difficult family home life for our male main character that we kind of like brushed over, but we didn't ever talk about. And I think that it really shaped who the character was, or it should have shaped who the character was, but it was just like a brush over. We just had like one conversation about it. They kind of have a discussion with the parents later on that kind of like reignites some things, but it didn't, I don't know, we didn't deal with it, if that makes sense. Again, 2016, we weren't dealing with things in therapy the way that we do now. It's fine. But I gave this one 2.5 stars. It was not great. I didn't love it. I will continue to read from Mia Sosa. I have read her traditionally published works. I just got her arc for her release that comes out, I want to say, this summer, that I'm very excited about. But you know, sometimes when you go to someone's backlist, especially when they have been writing for a decade, sometimes you don't love everything. I read all of Talia Hibbert's backlist, and there are books in that series, or in her catalog, that I don't love. So it was going to happen with Mia as well. But those were the books that I read in February. My favorite book was Queen of the Blood Throne, and then my least favorite was One Night with the CEO. It happens. It's fine. We will move on to March. It's already shaping up to be a great reading month. Let me know down in the comments below what your favorite book of February was, and if you want to check out any of the videos where I was talking about these books, I will have 2 of them linked right here. If you're not feeling chatty, let's go ahead and do the skull emoji, because this one has like some skulls. Yeah. That's all I have for you today. If you're new here and you have not yet subscribed, there's a little button that you can do so down below the video. If you'd like to hang out with me more, the links to my Instagram, Goodreads, Twitter, and my Patreon are linked in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!